Zookeepers of Reddit, what's the lowdown, dirty, inside scoop on zoos? I am a small animal vet now but worked in a zoo before vet school. Zoos are one of the biggest purchasers of Calvin Klein's Obsession cologne. The cologne has animal musk in it and it drives the big cats wild. We used to spray it on everything. Used to work at a zoo a few years ago. An elephant died while I was there, and to transport the body out of its enclosure they had to chop him up. R.I.P. Toto. The poor penguin keepers can never quite get rid of the miasma of dead fish that envelopes them. As for me, the stinkiest job I ever had to do was cleaning out the duck ponds. Managed to empty a whole train carriage that evening, even though I had changed and my work clothes were double bagged. As a teen I worked as a janitor at a private school. One of my duties was dumping out and rinsing the kiddie pool belonging to the duck. The muck on the bottom of that thing, especially in summer, freaking stank. Lions know fully well that they can't get through the glass. They do that just to get attention. I worked at a zoo in the museum function, not with the animals, and there was no glass in the big cat's enclosure. There was a giant moat which the Tadera were always playing in, and a 20-odd foot straight vertical concrete wall. You could tell when they were in play mode. They pace back and forth along the edge of the moat and suddenly jump in surprise and roll around on their backs. For the casual visitor, they seemed like an oversized house cat, while they absolutely had small cat-like behavior. I could never for a second forget what they could do. There was one particularly traumatic event with the lions on a very warm and very packed spring day. The zoo was inside a large park, so various animals wandered through the zoo all day. One unfortunate day, a large deer fell into the lion enclosure. The adolescent male stopped it and ran it down within about 30 seconds and tore the deer to shreds in front of dozens of horrified adults and screaming kids. I felt kind of bad that so many people saw, but, like, circle of life. Dead zoo animals are sometimes fed to carnivores. There's a farm zoo in the UK that uses crocodiles to get rid of dead cows. The owner once said he'd like the same end when he dies. I worked at a zoo in a northern country, can't say which as it'll give it away, which had a white tiger and was quite famous for it. One day the zoo announced the tiger had died of natural causes. Whilst working there a few years after he died, I was told by a keeper that there was actually a problem with the electric fencing in his enclosure that the zoo managers refused to pay to get fixed, thinking it would be fine. He was electrocuted to death a few weeks after they found the problem. They covered the whole thing up by saying they weren't sure how he died, but that he was old. It's still a zoo secret to this day. I really respect my local zoo, John Ball Zoo in Grand Rapids, Michigan, for being honest about an accident that happened a few years ago. They had a very popular stingray and shark petting tank. I loved it and always paid extra to be able to hang out with them and pet them. Unfortunately, one night there was an electrical issue of some kind, and I believe they were electrocuted to death. Everyone was devastated, and they haven't replaced the stingrays or sharks and never will, even though they were very popular. Zoo staff are honest with guests about what happened even now. Years later, I respect them for not lying or covering up the accident and instead using it as a conversation to be able to talk to folks about how important it is to properly care for animals and prevent accidents from happening. We closed the baboon exhibit because a baboon had a stillbirth and the troop was grieving. In reality, they were throwing parts of the infant corpse around and there was nothing we could do about it. I worked with wild macaques for a while, and when a baby died, the mother would sometimes carry it around for days. Some females would also steal live babies and carry them around like they were their own, except they couldn't nurse them, so they'd slowly starve to death. A few even stole baby raccoons, and that didn't go well either. I worked with macaques, too, and one degloved another one. He ripped the skin of his hand completely. Absolutely disgusting. Heard from the head of our primate section that our dominant male macaque was on antipsychotics or something akin. Apparently, they didn't like how aggressive he was to the others in front of guests. Macaques are just something else. At least my only worry with the spider monkeys was their repeated attempts to piss on me from a wire tunnel. One of these types of monkeys escaped from a neighborhood in my town where someone was keeping him as a pet apparently, and it created quite a panic and no one would claim him, I guess because he wasn't properly registered, but there were monkey sightings for like 2 weeks and he would torment people's dogs. Then after 2 weeks of that he just disappeared. I guess the owners caught him again or someone killed him or something. It was nuts. And the strangest part to me is I live in a completely boring and normal suburban town usually till something weird like this happens. I worked with large tortoises. We had these 5-gallon buckets for cleaning the poop out of enclosures and other buckets for feeding them fresh grass we cut. The first day on the job I took both buckets into the pen and started by dumping out the grass. Then I went around to collect poop. I heard this awful loud grunting and something breaking. One of the 300-pound males tried to bang a bucket in front of visitors and flattened it. He would even follow me around just in case I might leave more innocent buckets unattended. If you work with the animals, there's a good chance you'll not be able to have any kind of social life between the long hours, weekends, and the stench. I've been kicked out of stores after work because I apparently stunk way worse than I thought I did even after scrubbing off. And I am around animals every day, but I still can't stand when otter sea alien keepers are around me in all-hands meetings. The rotten fish ferrety otter smell combo is a gagger. Meanwhile, I work with apes, and they say that I smell like I haven't showed in a decade again, even after I shower. Oh man. I remember my first day working with foxes. My coworker was giving a tour of the facility to a family where they got to play with the foxes, and she made a big deal to them about make sure you don't touch anything wet in here. It might be fox pee and it will absolutely not come out of anything, including skin, and even gave them gloves to wear. Then they left, and she told me to start cleaning. I said, wait, don't we have to protect ourselves from fox pee like you said? She sort of laughed and said, you work here now, get used to your new smell. Sure enough, I inevitably got some fox piss on my hand. I washed it several times. I smelled it before bed that night, and sure enough, it smelled exactly like fox pee, very strongly. Washing not only didn't remove it, it didn't seem to even diminish it a little bit. By now I've stopped noticing, but no one else has. Went on a behind-the-scenes tour of the zoo. Saw quite a few bunnies come out during the tour. The neighboring park had a problem with people abandoning pet rabbits. It was pretty clear the dumb bunnies were getting into predator enclosures. Tour guide confirmed they were regularly getting eaten. Tour guide also indicated other urban wildlife, raccoons, possums, squirrels, birds were regularly eaten by predators. Said that when they drained the lion enclosure moat for maintenance, it was filled with the bones of small mammals. The most amusing stories were about the orangutans, who were wicked smart. Zookeeper trained them to give over items in exchange for food in case they needed to get something from them in the enclosure. But orangutans are smart and realized if they break things up and hand it back in lots of little pieces, they get more food. They disassembled a radio that accidentally got left in the enclosure, which, and when there was an opossum in the enclosure, the results were a bit more gruesome. I was at a zoo a few years ago alone in a glass viewing room at the orangutan enclosure. It had floor-to-ceiling glass windows, and a huge orangutan knocked on the glass, pointed to my backpack, and miming taking items out of it and putting them on the floor. I took everything out, put it all on the floor, and showed the empty bag to the orangutan, who went wild and brought another orangutan over. There were these small vents at the bottom of the glass, I guess to stop it fogging up, and they stuck their fingers through to try and get me to give them one of the items. My girlfriend didn't believe me until we went in, and they did the same with her purse. As soon as anyone else came in, they stopped and acted all casual like they weren't doing anything. I worked in two completely different departments, elephants and neonates, but the drama between keepers was insane in both. Like, attempted murder level insane. We didn't have mad drama, but damn near everyone had slept with everyone. There was a girl from birds that cheated on her boyfriend, who was also birds, with a guy on small primates. It turned into a whole thing with everyone having an opinion. Partner was a zookeeper in Dallas. Safety protocols for when a large, dangerous animal escapes its enclosure dictate that you lock yourself in whatever room you can get to quickest and grab the nearest weapon, which, for most zookeepers, was a broom or rake for cleaning up animal poop. Not a zookeeper, but someone who has designed equipment and caking for zoos. I was told many horror stories how some animals would get hurt or even killed because of trying to find ways out of the caking. They can range from really stupid to incredibly brilliant. Had to replace a giraffe indoor pen. The previous one had vertical bars. Think old jail cell bars. A bull giraffe stuck his head out, then turned and went back into the side to see what's behind him. He freaked out and essentially hung himself. So we couldn't use vertical bars that they could stick their head through. Witnessed a silverback gorilla having a bad day. He seemed tired of the crowd and put a box on his head to make the world go away. People kept watching. He kept getting annoyed and finally threw the box off, charged us and pounded on the glass. I am well aware that glass can take several shots from a .50 calories rifle, but the explosive bang from the gorilla hitting the glass was insane and terrified everyone. Ostriches run on instinct primarily. I designed a cage for the vet to treat them. It was entirely enclosed and had multiple small doors doors all around the cage. The reason is the vet told me about an instance where an ostrich got its foot cut and needed stitches. They got the bird in the cage and one vet fed bird and the other stitched up the cut. No anesthesia, just a diversion. The bird just kept eating and didn't care about getting the stitches. In a different zoo they needed to replace the caking of a very large bird of prey. I don't remember the species, but I do remember seeing what its claws did to the aluminum tubing cage they kept it in. The aluminum was shredded, and whoever was on the other side was either going to have a bad day or get what they deserve for pissing off this bird. I of course went with stainless steel heavy gauge rod for the cage. The shop hated all the welding, but in the end the cage was way nicer and stronger than the old one. I didn't get to travel much with the installation crew, but I was in the shop supervising the building of caking. There were many times I had to have things re-welded or redone because of safety and QC issues. Remember when you visit a zoo that oftentimes your life is depending on someone that wasn't qualified, underpaid, and overworked. Whenever I visit a zoo, I look at the structure design and how it was put together. Too many times I see welds that are of poor quality and barely hold the structure in place, let alone stop something big and heavy that's pissed off. Former coworker got a job at the aquarium. He was basically the night watchman, making sure nothing exploded when the aquarium was closed. The thing is, he can't actually do anything about it. A ray jumped out of the open touch pool, so he gently picked it up and set it back in the tank. No harm done. Ray is fine. He got Chew the duck out for handling an animal. Policy is to call the expert handler for that department and have them come in to avoid any liability and whatnot. By the time you get them to pick up the phone at 3 a.m., get up and drive into the city, it'll be like 40 minutes at best, assuming they came in at all. So his job was really to just stand there staring as the animal suffocated. He ended up quitting when he tried to call out sick because he had the flu so bad he literally couldn't stand up straight, and part of the job was to walk the narrow hanging walkway over the largest tank in the world, which includes sharks, alone at night, and they told him to come in anyway. That's strange. I am an aquarist and we get mad when life support or education calls us on the radio that something in a touch pool just jumped out. PLS, come help, put it back in. Obviously we want to know it happened so we can come check on the animal, but put it back in first. I could see if there are different holding systems around with different parameters, and education or LSS might not be reliable to put it in the right place, and the wrong temp, or if it's fresh salt could kill it. But holy shit, if there's a lag time, just tell them where to put it or train better. This sounds like one of those situations where the on-call staff are like, put it the duck back in. The night watchman is 100% planning to put it back in, but the mid-level manager at the third-party contracting firm that employs the night watchman on behalf of the aquarium is quoting paragraph 47 subsection 3c of the liability clauses for why that's not an allowable action, at which point any sensible and caring night watchman learns not to tell the management anything anymore. I used to volunteer weekly at a large zoo, and at one point management started doing monthly dangerous animal escape drills. Someone would run around in a line in a sea and we'd have to react as if one of the large animals had escaped. It was hilarious, but one of the funniest things I was taught was that if an incident did occur, you have to tell the nearby guests to get inside only once. If after that they refused to follow you indoors, the protocol was to hole up in the large activity center buildings. You're to leave them there, go inside yourself and lock the doors. It makes sense because people can be very stupid and you don't want to risk everyone's lives because of one Karen. But it amused me no end that the protocol was to just let them get mauled. Not a zookeeper, but I'm a zoologist. Aquariums have captive breeding programs for some of the dolphins and whales, but they are too difficult to transport for mating, so they have to use artificial insemination, which requires semen samples from whales, which means that it's someone's job to give hand jobs to dolphins and whales in order to collect the sperm. It's part of the animal's training, and the whales will roll over and present their genitals on command. Not quite a zookeeper, but in training to be one. The zebras and Przewalski's horses are ruthless and will tear apart any unfortunate wild kangaroo that dares break into an enclosure. They love the thrill of the chase and the subsequent kill when they get bored. I volunteered in an aquarium, and the people always ask about whether the sharks that are in with the fish ever eat the fish. Officially we say we keep them well fed enough that they don't, but on more than one morning on my initial walk around I have found remains of fish that definitely weren't feed fish. On a particularly memorable occasion I found the head of a large porky just sitting on the bottom. A diver went in and got it before guests arrived. I did co-opiate one for 2 weeks. The Sumatran tigers had a nice enclosure, but the overnight enclosure was very small and depressing. I would walk around the outdoor enclosure hiding meatballs while they were in there, and I was always scared someone would forget I am out there. There's nothing like that smell of tiger urine. As soon as I first smelled it, it's like an instinct kicked in and all the hairs on my body raised as if I just knew there was something close that could kill me. Also, so many people drop money beneath the walkways. I found a few 5.00 bills. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.